Hello, my name is Christal Hall, and I want to welcome you to the 12th episode of Overcomer, Living a Full Life After. I'm really excited about today's episode because I had the opportunity to interview Vikki Stark. Vikki wrote the book Runaway Husbands, The Abandoned Wife's Guide to Recovery and Renewal. And this is a book that I think I'm very fortunate that I found very early in this journey that I've been on now for almost 2 years. It is a book that I, even 2 years later, turn to when I am needing kind of some additional guidance. I do consider myself very lucky that Vikki took the time to do this interview with me. You know, we went over a variety of topics that I think is going to be really helpful to other women who have found themselves on this path. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed being able to ask questions of her and kind of have a conversation about what it means to be an abandoned wife and what it looks like when we are dealing with the men in our lives who have changed seemingly overnight. That's today's episode, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. So I want to welcome you, Vikki, for joining us. And what I'd like for you to do this morning is, as I've discussed previously, that how I often start the show off is telling me kind of about your own story in order to provide kind of a context for other people who are listening to this, and how you came to write Runaway Husbands.
Okay, so Runaway Husbands, which really totally changed my life. So I had been a therapist for about 25 years, a marriage counselor, a divorce counselor, and I had believed that I was in the most beautiful, secure relationship, the most beautiful, secure marriage with my husband, who was a total sweetheart. And I had written my first book, My Sister, Myself, and I had been on a book tour for 23 days traveling across America. And the book tour ended in San Diego. I live in Montreal. I took the red eye back, and my husband picked me up at the airport. And after 23 days on the road, I was so happy to see him. I was so exhausted. I fell in his arms. I gave him a big hug, and he seemed a little bit diffident, and it was a little surprising, but nevertheless. So he drove me home, and he dropped me off, which was unusual because typically, after being apart for so long, he would want to be together. He'd want to at least stay for coffee before going to work. So I didn't think anything of it. And throughout that day, I was unpacking and getting used to being home. And I took a shower, and I noticed there was a long dark hair in the bottom of the bathtub. And I thought, that's weird. Mm-hmm. But I have 2 daughters with long hair. And so I telephoned my daughter. I said, have you been to my house recently? And she said, no. And being the trusting, loving person that I am, who couldn't even enter into the thought that black hair got there from something, I forgot about it. Right. And then I went in the kitchen, and I noticed that all of the colander was in a different location, and the spatula was in a different drawer. And we've lived there for years. And how come suddenly, while I was away, he forgot where the colander goes? Yeah. So I didn't think anything of that either, being the person that I am. Right. And so I prepared dinner, and that night he came home from work, and I said to him, I bought fish. And he said, it's over. And I said, fine, you don't want fish? We'll have chicken. And he said, no, it's over, and I'm leaving you right now. And then he proceeded to tell me that he had a girlfriend for 6 years, which I knew nothing about. And that he was moving in with her right then. So that was, of course, so traumatic. It came totally out of the blue. I had no inkling. We hadn't been fighting. There was just really no signs at all. And I should see the signs because I'm a marriage counselor, right?
Right.
And so I prevailed upon him to stay overnight, but he threw his stuff in garbage bags and left the next morning. And that was the end of that 21-year marriage. So, of course, like everybody, like all the other women who have been through this, I was so traumatized. But because I was a marriage counselor, I knew that it was over.
Yeah.
I knew that he was with her and that she was his new person and that it was over. And so I didn't really hold out many hopes that he would come back, although I know a lot of women do. So I struggled like everyone else. I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't eat. I was so devastated. But I knew I had to understand what had happened. How does this happen? How does somebody go from being a devoted, loving, doting husband to somebody who not only walks away, but then sort of turns on me and becomes cruel and mean and withholding and difficult, and I just didn't recognize him. I knew I had to learn about this, and I started researching it, of course, on the internet like everyone does, and at that point there was nothing written. I started talking with other people, and little by little I started hearing other similar stories, and they were eerily like mine. Mm-hmm. And that sort of, because I'd already written a book, that sort of twigged in my head, I should maybe research this a bit more. Right. And so I did, and started learning more about this phenomenon. And then I started the study, which eventually was of 400 women worldwide who had been left out of the blue from what they believed to be a happy, secure, stable marriage. And the study was partly face-to-face interviews that I did with people either in person or over the phone or through Skype. And it was partly online questionnaires. Okay. And so when I started, at a certain point, I got all the questionnaires. And then one day I sat down, started reading to analyze the data. And I was just completely blown away that there was such a clear patterning from the men who left, from how they left, what they said, what their excuses were, how they behaved afterwards, how they related to their wife and their children. And it was mind-blowing. And so that's what led to the writing of Runaway Husbands. Right. And then eventually creating the runawayhusbands.com website, which became a meeting ground for the women. And then doing the other pieces like running the retreats that I run regularly every year, where people come together, like where I met you. Yes. And also the other online services that we provide for women.
Right. So the anger. So that's one of the questions that has come up over and over again in the group is, why are these men so angry? And part of that is they're like, the women keep asking, they're so angry at us, but they're the ones that's doing all this stuff, right? And it's not like we're not the ones that cheated, but they're so angry at us. Why are they so angry at us? Yeah. So what causes that, do you think?
It's a huge question, because the first thing that people need to do when their husbands leave is understand. Right. How does this happen? How does somebody morph overnight into an angry stranger? In the years since all this happened to me, obviously I've spoken to a lot of people, and I've done a lot of, speaking to other therapists and trying to understand what has gone on. And I think I do. And how I understand it is that I know that my husband, he had this affair for 6 years, and it took him so long to leave because I was a very good wife. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he had a very good life with me. Part of a secure family. We had a circle of friends, took good care of him. I cooked. I ran a nice household, so that he was going back and forth. But he probably, I'm guessing, in his own mind, was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it took me being away for 23 days and him being able to understand that he could survive without me, for him to realize, okay, I'm going to leave. Yes. And I think that that's true for a lot of men. I think that they have a lot of ambivalence because their lives with their wives have a lot of pluses in it, mm-hmm. and are very, very close to their identity, and that they feel very comfortable there. And the girlfriend is very exciting and makes them feel alive, but they have to trade off one thing for another. So in order to walk away from the wife, they can't, because they're fighting with their own ambivalence. So they have to push very hard away from the side. They have to, like from the side of the pool, they have to push away very hard in order to be sure that they don't capitulate and that they don't go back. Because they've tried to get themselves to leave so many times, and they chickened out, and they're afraid they're going to chicken out. So they have to create a big story in their mind about the wife. And you can't say, leaving my wife, but she's a lovely woman and so beautiful,
right.
and such a doll, and such a great caregiver and homemaker, and we have a great life together. However, I'm leaving her because that makes you sound like you're a lunatic.
Right.
So instead, you have to say, I have to leave her because she's like this and she's like that. And, she's so bossy and she's so dominant, and she tells me what to do and all of this stuff, which is code war. She takes good care of me and helps me make decisions when I can't make them on my own.
Right.
But he has to say she's so controlling, which is a very common thing that men say.
Yeah. For me,
in order to justify.
Right. For me, I got too big for my britches.
Okay, exactly. Because you're confident. Yeah. So, he has to create this big case,
right,
and be very angry with you. Otherwise, if he starts to permit any kind or tender feelings, he's afraid. He's afraid he's going to go back. And that's a large part of the reason why they have to create this story of what a monster the wife is in order to justify their own decision.
Well, I think, again, when we talk about the similarities, it's the anger, it's, I think, almost in a way, the surprise, I think, that some of the men exhibit when they do drop the bomb. That I think that, at least with my own experience, is that my ex-husband actually acted really surprised when I didn't say, oh yeah, of course we're done, So I think that, again, they create this story in their head about what they think is going to happen, and then when that doesn't happen, I'm sure it creates tremendous turmoil for them, because, again, they have created this scenario, and I think part of that scenario, and I think part of the reluctance or ambivalence that they fear is they absolutely have comfort with us because we are the known commodity, right? If
yes.
you leave this life into something, and as exciting as it is,
yes.
it's still very unknown. And
sure.
So I think the other part of it is that if they show us all this, if they are so angry towards us, I think part of that too is then they think in their heads that we're just going to walk away too, because what sane person is going to put up with the abuse that they heap upon us, right?
Right. But I think that, one woman said to me, he left me 6 months ago. He just forgot to tell me. So in his mind, he's seeing how bad everything is. In our mind, it's, we're not having such a good day.
Right.
But he's seeing how bad everything is. And to him, it's obvious that this marriage is at an end. And he just forgot to tell us.
Right.
We don't know what's going on in his mind because he never mentioned it before. That's one thing. But I think there's another element to it. And the other element is that, like, for example, in my case, I was very invested in taking care of him. My husband had serious health problems. And for the 21 years of our relationship, I always took care of him and put his happiness first. And he will assume, even when he's walking away, that, wait a minute, Vikki, you've changed. You're supposed to put my happiness first. I thought you'd be happy for me. I thought you'd want what's best for me.
Right.
And that's because that's a testament to the wives who are left behind. Because we're such good caretakers that even in walking away, they think that we're still going to be their caretakers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me because again, it's about the similarities. That's exactly what mine said at one point. Is I thought you would want me to be happy.
Exactly.
I thought our happiness was kind of linked together there.
No, totally. But that gives you a window into his perception.
Yeah.
His view is this marriage is so bad and it's on its last legs, and anyone can see that.
Right.
And our view might be that, and often the men they're in a bad state of mind and they're complaining about work. They're in a bad mood, but they've been in a bad mood before. It doesn't really mean anything. And they often complain about work.
Yes.
And so you're assuming that they're unhappy with this or they're unhappy with that. and they don't tell you that they're unhappy in their lives and with their relationship because they're too afraid
right.
of your response. They're too afraid of our anger. They're classically conflict avoiders. And so they don't want to face the anger. They're grumpy. They're not in the best of moods. And so they don't want to, so that in their mind, it's crystal clear that this marriage is over. But in our mind, they actually haven't given any indication that that's what's going on until they lower the boom and boom, it's over.
Well, and you mentioned being gone for the 23 days. I was gone for 2 weeks. And one of the things that he said to me was that's kind of when he realized that he was like, I had my own freedom. I could, go to whatever restaurant I wanted to do. Now I'm assuming that when he was going to these restaurants, he was probably going with the other person, but he's like, I just had all this freedom. And it's interesting to me, again, when we look at the commonalities between these stories, that there's some type of event like that happens. And so I think it's almost like a test run for them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, either it's the wife who's been away, or it's the husband who's been away. And sometimes it can only be a weekend and whatever. But don't forget, for the majority of cases, there is another woman. Mm-hmm. And that she's been knocking on his head for some period of time saying, wife, when is it over? When are you going to come to me and leave your wife? And so that wife is away, then she, like the woman, my ex-husband's girlfriend, who was living in my house, who was sleeping in my bed, who was going through my underwear drawer, I'm sure, and looking at my things on my desk while I was away, and they were playing house. Yeah. So that during that period of time while I was away, they start to establish their residence in my house. Yeah. Pretty weird. I don't get hurt so easily because I don't really care. That's fine. They had that experience of testing it out and seeing what it was like. Plus, she had his full attention during that period of time. Yeah. When the wife was away, or when he's away on a business trip and he's alone in that hotel room and thinking, and the glue between him and his wife starts to dry out a little bit. Right. And for some reason, I mean, obviously it's not in every case, but it's just struck me that in many cases somebody had been away. Yeah. I mean, and that's pretty amazing, because I just think it goes back to they're able to live out this fantasy in real time, when if they're away or we're away, and I do think that you're right, that the other person is probably also putting that pressure on them, and yes. Once that pressure is applied, and they're it's this conflict that they're in, which again, it's amazing to me that they're conflict avoidant, but they get into something that's going to create so much conflict, not only for themselves, but for anybody that's part of that family. It's going to create conflict. And so they're truly, I think, living in this alternative reality where yes. They're not really looking at the full ramifications of the decision that they are going to make. And, that's the other part of it is, if there are kids involved, how do we help our kids, either if they're younger or grown up, how do we help them also move through this transition in the healthiest way possible? Yeah, I'll answer that question, but just going back to that idea that they don't understand the ramifications of the decision. A lot of women that I've worked with have said to me, why didn't he say, we've got problems, we need to go for counseling? That's a mystery to people. Why didn't he recognize we've got problems, and why didn't he work on it? Yes. A lot of women are very hurt by the fact that he just flew away, like my husband just walked away from one minute to the next, and there was no effort made on his behalf to retrieve the marriage. Right. And I just wanted to underscore that point, that for many of the women that I've worked with over the years who have had runaway husbands, their husbands are not serial, affair guys. Right. They're not guys who typically have affairs. They're guys who are devoted husbands, like I believe my husband was. And then something happens. And typically what happens, and how we understand it, is that they get to a certain age, or their father dies, or they lose their job, or something happens in their life, and they start to feel like, is this all there is?
Yes.
I've been a good husband, I've been a good father, I've been a good son, I've been a good provider. I've devoted my life to my family. When do I get to be James Bond?
Right.
When do I get to have my turn? Then when they're in that frame of mind, somebody, and it's often somebody at the office, or it's the personal trainer or the massage therapist, or I don't know, the kid's babysitter, some younger woman looks up at him and says, oh my God, you're so interesting. Tell me that story, which the wife has heard 55 times.
Right.
And, tell me all about you. And he looks like a very attractive man to her. And so he falls.
Yes. And
he's just so thrilled that he feels alive again, that he feels hot, he feels sexy,
right.
That he gets really turned on, in a way that he doesn't with his wife so much anymore.
Right.
And with the wife, it's more of the same thing, or it's a bit of an arm wrestle about being sexual and all of that. But with the girlfriend, it's an affair, so it's exciting, and he feels alive and excited. So there's no decision-making process that's going to come into this, because for him, it feels like choosing life or choosing jail time.
Right.
He just can't stop himself.
Right.
And there's no point to go to marriage counseling because he's already gone.
Yes.
He left 6 months ago and forgot to tell her. Emotionally, he knows he's already gone. He was just waiting till he could get the courage to pull the plug and do the next, and move on to the next phase in his life. That explains why they don't go to marriage. It's not like they're sort of thinking, oh, things are not so great with my wife and, we really need to work on it and all that. No, he's in this altered state of testosterone and excitement. And he's thinking like an 18-year-old. And he doesn't, again, it's the same thing. He doesn't want to go to marriage counseling and have his mind changed.
Right. Well,
that's not what he wants.
They're very resistant because my ex and I, we went to 4 counseling sessions together. And that was probably, I would say, one of the most traumatic experiences I went through, just because he was allowed, I think, in a way to really express his anger towards me. Yes. And it wasn't helpful. And I just kept going, here is this person who I had no idea was harboring all this resentment and anger and dissatisfaction over the things that I had done, thinking, the things that I was doing was all about, making sure that we had food on the table and, a secure retirement, so I was like building up this future in my head, and he saw it as, I guess, me undermining his masculinity. I don't know, but it was pretty amazing to me. And I think that's part of it, is that when you go through something like this, you always think that, hey, if things get really bad in our marriage, we're 2 adults, we're going to talk about it. And if we both make the decision to end it,
right, then
that's the decision. Both of us will be happy with it. But that decision is completely taken away from us.
Yes. And that's a large contributor to the trauma.
Yes.
When your life changes on a dime, whether it's a car accident or an assault in the street or your husband walking away, your life changes on a dime, and your future is completely different than what 10 minutes ago, what you thought it was going to be. You don't recognize your life. Your mind can't integrate the new reality. The mind locks. And that's where we get traumatized. And that's why the women who have experienced this have so many physical, somatic complaints. Nausea, vomiting, weight loss, crying, heart palpitations. And it's so bad that, in some cases, women actually get a heart attack. There's a certain thing called heartbreak heart attack, that women can actually have such an intense physical reaction that they, I know for myself, I became anemic, which I'd never been before. But, that it affects your body. And that's what indicates that it's an actual physical trauma.
Right. Right.
And that's why it takes so long to recover from. But getting back to your other question about how do we help the children and the young adults get through this, because it's happened to them too.
Well, and they question, just like we question, has this whole 20, 30 years, has this all been a facade? And
Exactly.
look at their dad, as, was he just living this lie and just was waiting for us to grow up and move out, especially if they're older.
Yeah.
Everything that we know about our dad doesn't seem to be true. And so that's a real struggle, I think, that especially if you have young adults, that they
Yes.
struggle with.
Yeah. It's a huge struggle. And often they feel not acknowledged in the whole process because the mom is so devastated. It's interesting, for younger children, they don't have any choice. Often they go back and forth.
Right.
The divorce agreement requires them to go back and forth. So they have to go to their dad's house and they have to have that life with their dad. And maybe the dad's helping them with homework or taking them bike riding or going to the zoo or something like that. So they have a certain relationship with their dad that continues in the normal parent-child way.
Right.
So it's for the older teens and the young adults that have a choice, that have an option, whether they're going to see their dad or not, and who often don't see their dad, choose not to see their dad because they feel betrayed. Mm-hmm. And so that means that the parent-child relationship gets cut.
Right.
In the same way that the husband-wife relationship has been cut. And so because the child they don't know how to get over their anger, they see their mother is devastated, they see their father is all happy and excited in his new life, mm-hmm. and wants them to be happy for him and wants them to come and meet the new girlfriend and meet her children and fold them into his new life. And they don't understand why their kids are so reluctant to do that and so angry and so it's so screwed up by everything that happened.
Right. And then they blame the mom, right?
That's the typical thing. Yeah. That the husbands say, oh, the mom is poisoning your mind. If your mom weren't so depressed, or if your mom wasn't talking badly about me or whatever, then we could just continue on in our relationship, mm-hmm. As a father and child.
Right.
And they don't understand that when you're 16 or 26 or something, or even when you're 6, you're old enough to be able to observe what's going on and come to your own conclusions.
Right.
So this is the father who might have taught them values when they were growing up, who might have taught them about honesty, how important it is to be honest. You don't lie to people. How important it is to, take care of your mom. You don't talk to your mom that way.
Exactly.
All the things that the dad might have taught them growing up, and now suddenly they see him doing the opposite and lying to mom and lying to them,
right?
And talking disrespectfully to the mom or whatever, and that's very confusing when the person who you looked up to and admired shifts,
right,
and becomes somebody that you lose respect for. It can devastate you and makes you wonder, who can I trust?
Right. Well, yeah, again, 32 years with my ex-husband, and my oldest and my youngest were entering into marriages that summer.
Yes.
And so it could not have happened literally at a worse time.
Yes.
But I look at that and that's part of, I guess, my anger towards him is, why couldn't he have kept it together long enough to where our kids could enter their marriages without this happening? Because yes. Again, it made them, I think, in many respects kind of question. So 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, is what just happened between my parents going to happen to me? And I'm entering this relationship hoping that's going to be forever, but I've just seen what I thought was going to be forever.
Yes.
Blow up.
Yeah. It's very rough. Yeah. It's very hard for them.
Yeah.
But the dads don't get that at all. They're not able to anticipate what's in how extreme the reaction is going to be. And the metaphor that I use is that if you push a boulder off the top of a hill, and it starts rolling down, it's going to break a tree and trample a flower, and you can't anticipate what damage is going to be done once you start this process in motion. Right. And I think often the men are shocked that their children don't want to see them. And they're also devastated. It doesn't mean that they're a bad father. Sometimes they can be a very loving father, and just got screwed up in the relationship with the wife, but they lose that option. In the same way the men took away the wife's option to be a wife, the children take away the father's option to be a father.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said earlier about, in their heads, they think that we're going to be happy for them or want them to be happy. And I think that they think that that's the same thing that their kids are going to, well, my kids just want me to be happy. And absolutely, my kids they just want their dad to be happy, you know, but they didn't want it to be necessarily at the expense of our family.
Yes. And all the changes that take place, right? All the birthday parties, all the Christmas dinners, all the events, all the graduations, all the marriages where it's awkward and uncomfortable. And now there's this layer of stress all the time. Yeah. So, just the most simple things. I remember, this is maybe a different kind of circumstance, but I worked with a girl whose parents got divorced. And the dad went on a business trip to Norway and brought her this beautiful Norwegian sweater. Mm-hmm. And she was about 15 or something, and she was very happy, and she got the sweater, and the mother said, well, he buys you things, but, he doesn't have money to give me to pay for your piano lessons or something like that. So now the girl feels like, well, I'm going to wear this sweater. Now I can't wear the sweater because it upsets my mother. Right. So even on the most mundane level, sometimes things become charged and loaded where they never were before. So that, that's another unanticipated consequence of pushing that boulder off the hill and then never knowing what kind of damage it's going to do.
Right. Well, and I've had to say to my kids, so my youngest grandson is going to be a year old in June. And I basically told my son and his wife, I said, it's Michael's first birthday. You guys have to know that if you want to have a birthday party, that you invite whoever you want. And mm-hmm. I will do what I need to do in order to get through it. So if you're inviting I said to them, I said, I have to come to a place essentially where I'm going to have to be around him. Mm-hmm. And I don't ever want you guys to make decisions about whether or not you should invite one of us, because we are the grownups here. Yeah. And we're just going to have to deal with whatever. Right. Yeah. So that's beautiful. That being said, they're like, my youngest son, he's told me, it's like, Mom, this creates stress that I never even thought I'd have to think about.
Yes, exactly. And, and a lot of moms couldn't do that, and might say, if you invite your dad, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
Or don't invite your dad because I want to come. Or your dad will come to the first part of the party and I'll come to the second part of the party, or whatever.
Right.
And then it's just excruciating. It ruins everything.
Right.
And so that's very, that's so wonderful that you're able to sort of hold your nose and say, this is just the start of a whole lifetime of being separated, of being divorced. So, we're not going to screw up all the kids' events for the rest of their lives because it's uncomfortable for us. And, another sort of maxim that I have is, what's extraordinary becomes ordinary.
Right. So
that, initially it feels so awkward and painful to be in the room with him. But after you've done it 5 times, at your grandson's birthday party, and then at the other party, and then at this, that, and the other thing, after you've done it 5-10 times, then it just becomes commonplace.
Right.
And just the other thing I wanted to mention is that I've heard several times about your child's having a wedding or a graduation, and you're agonizing about going because he's going to be there, and that somehow that women go, and it's not that bad.
Yeah.
He's sort of skulking around at the perimeter of the party, and the mom is more central at the party, and it's not that bad. And so that a lot of times there's all this anticipatory anxiety about seeing him again.
Right.
But once you break the ice, it's only George.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
it's only George. It's same old George, whatever.
Right.
And it's, it stops being so painful over time.
Right. Well, again, for me, it's always been about trying to make sure, that I put my kids first. And so, I think that's part of it, is that when you're going through something like this, and if you have kids involved, the thing that I said to my own therapist was that I feel like I have to be the stable parent, the parent who is rational, and I can't, as much as this has been incredibly painful, and it's taken me a while to get to this place. My kids can't suffer the consequences of what has happened. And so it, all goes back to that unconditional love that we have for our kids. And so I want to do whatever I can to minimize the stress. And, so that being said, whenever that birthday party happens, I will probably have a therapy session a couple of days before. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. So one of the questions that came up in the group is, how do we stop the obsessive thoughts of our husbands with being with the other woman and their new lives?
Yes. So one of the things that contributes to that, well, first of all, in the first 6 months, let's say, definitely in the first 3 months, but in the first 6 months, you can't.
Right. You
can't, because that's part of the trauma. When the trauma happens, whether it's a car accident or an assault on the street, like I said, it's your mind is saying, how did that happen? How did the car jump the rail? How did that other car come here? You're trying to absorb it. Like, he said this, and he always told me that. And then where was he when he said he was there? And you're trying to piece together what happened in my life.
Right.
And you don't really know what happened in your life. And so you're trying to understand that. And that's going to be normal. And unfortunately, it's so painful and it's so exhausting, but it's sort of inevitable. I believe it's sort of inevitable, that's going to happen. But after 6 months or 8 months, or, as we're getting close to a year, hopefully that those obsessive thoughts are going to start leaving you. For those women who have a job and go to work during the day, they can escape that constant reworking in their minds for 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that helps recover from that stage of obsession, is to be occupied, to just get through the day, to do the things that you need to do, and to have some distractions. So for a certain percentage of the women, they've been stay-at-home moms, and they've been in the house, and the husband leaves, and then they have this big day in front of them where all they're going to do is grieve and feel the pain.
Right.
And that's very hard. So, not that they all have to go out and get a job, but if you can join a group, or if you can volunteer at the hospital, or if you can do something that will start to fill up your time more, that will help with the obsessive thoughts.
Right.
That being said, there's a certain number of women, certain percentage, that years later, it's still the touchstone, the touchstone of their lives. So anything that happens, they're thinking, oh, well, if he hadn't done this bad thing wouldn't have happened.
So they get stuck.
And they're spinning their wheels in the mud, and they can't get traction to move forward. And definitely therapy helps. And to find a therapist who understands this phenomenon of wife abandonment, which is different than a typical divorce, because not all therapists do, but to understand also, and I think that this is part of the important thing, is to recognize that life will throw us challenges. And often for those women who've had a beautiful, perfect life with their husband, they're not used to dealing with the hard stuff. But there's no guarantees. It can be anything. It could be an illness. It could be anything that's going to derail your life. And the question is, how are you going to face what life sends you? Right. And try to face it with courage and with grace, and say, okay, life, bring it on. I can handle this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to move forward in my life. And I know it's easy to say for those women whose life circumstances have been really curtailed, maybe they had a wealthy husband and they traveled and they had, all of the stuff, and now they're living in a condo somewhere or an apartment somewhere, and, they don't have the money coming in, or, they don't have the two salaries, and their lives are harder, actually harder. But in spite of all that, I think it's possible to choose happiness and to say, what a blessing to wake up today, to not be in a hospital bed somewhere, and to really be able to appreciate life and appreciate the things that we do have.
Right.
Rather than keeping the focus on the things that we've lost. For many women, like I know, for many women, they might have a beautiful family.
Mm-hmm.
They might have children and grandchildren, and what a blessing that is, and they might, have friends or people who care about them, or siblings or parents even, they might have other people in their lives, and there's many different kinds of love. You can have a Cocker Spaniel, or even go outside and, commune with nature, or try to move, try to just appreciate being alive, because that sense of gratitude and appreciation is tremendously healing.
Right. Well, and I think it is the opportunity to kind of re-examine. I mean, just like I think these men have spent years looking at their own lives and trying to figure out why they are so unhappy. And then I think that's part of the reason why, like with my ex-husband, it was, buying a Harley Davidson motorcycle. They figure out, this is what I'm going to do in order to make myself happy. And I think that we almost have to do the same thing. So what are the things that we did not do during our marriage?
Yes.
What are the things that we can tap back into in order to find ourselves again? Because I think, with any type of long-term relationship, there are things that we give up, not necessarily because the other person has asked you to give up, but, through the process of raising a family, living life, that sort of thing. And we do have all this additional time on our hands, so for me, it was relearning the piano, teaching myself how to crochet. I mean, these were things that I tried to do in order to occupy the space in the evening time, because I do work, but times can be really difficult. Joining a meetup group. I live in a community that I was not born and raised in. And so I live here and I didn't really have friends. And so I joined a meetup group. I've managed to meet a couple of really wonderful women that we go out and do stuff together, so it's stuff like that, where when I'm talking to different women in the Runaway Husbands group, that I try to, in my podcast, I try to say, now is your opportunity. Try to figure out what it is that you want to do. Be selfish with yourself.
But like anything in life, there are pluses and minuses.
Mm-hmm.
When a husband leaves, it feels like the minuses are so huge and the pluses are so small. But there are pluses and minuses, and if you can look at the pluses, you have freedom to do things. You can do whatever you want. You can make your choices. You can go on vacation next to someone who's snoring, or whatever the pluses are. That we can grab hold of those.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, like any kind of grieving process, eventually time will heal, hopefully. And if time is not healing, then we need to, really be aware of that and go into therapy and figure out what's holding you back from moving on, doing the next step. Like you, Christal, doing your podcast and doing these amazing things and providing a service to other people who are struggling in their lives. We're all struggling in our lives one way or another, even if you can't see it. The people who look terrific and look like they have it all, we're all struggling to be happy and to get our way through this life with a sense of appreciation and joy. And so in your podcast, you're providing so much, and it's really done with love, and it's enriching other people's lives. And that's exactly the kind of thing that people, need. Not everyone can start a podcast, but
right.
But it's the kind of thing, to start to think, what can I do that will contribute to this world?
Right. Exactly. Well, I think that's a big part of it, is finding that sense of purpose. And I think once you have found that sense of purpose, then, that is not to say that I don't still get sad. Believe me, yes. I still get sad. And I kind of have come to this place of acceptance where I think there's always going to be a part of me who is going to be sad about what I thought was going to be my future.
Yep.
And I still care about my ex-husband. I don't want anything bad to happen. That's always going to be a part of me. Our past, that's always going to be a part of me. Again, it's going back to, if we can figure out what is going to be our driving force, and if we can tap into that, then I think then when you're getting through those down times, that you're going to be able to work through them much easier.
And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing.
Absolutely.
It can be helping out a neighbor, or watching a neighbor's dog or something, just something that keeps you connected to other people and to your community. I just want to say the Runaway Husbands community is a fabulous resource. And the Runaway Husbands Facebook group and the healing circles that are worldwide, where you can connect with people in your own community. And it's free. You get together and, you might meet for coffee if there's somebody else in the community, or coming to the Jump Up in Montreal, or, coming to one of the retreats. The different things that are available, they're so valuable to be able to talk to other people who really know what you're going through.
Absolutely. And again, the Jump Up retreat that I went to, as there's a group of us women who really connected. And so we text each other, like if there's something that's going on, and we all get it, because nobody who's, if you've not experienced this, you're not going to get it. It's not a typical divorce.
Yes.
And so being able to share the frustration and the pain, whatever, or even the happiness, the great things that are going on, and knowing that you have other people who have gone through exactly what you've gone through, that sense of, it is a community, right? And so that's part of it. That's part of that connection. How about interacting? And I think this is more pertinent to women with younger children. How do you deal with interactions with the other woman? What's your advice there?
I think it's on a case-by-case basis. Being a therapist, when somebody calls me up and makes an appointment, I don't know what they're going to be talking about. They can be talking about anything. Mm-hmm. So in my practice, I have had many, many clients who are the other woman. I have many clients who are the men thinking of leaving their wives. I've been a therapist for 35 years. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. When I have clients who are the other woman, often they say to me that the boyfriend is saying to them, oh, my marriage is over. We're just living under the same roof. We're basically separated in the same house. Mm-hmm. I mean, very often the husbands sell them a bill of goods, right, and tell them that, she knows it's over, the wife knows it's over, and they tell the other woman all sorts of things that aren't necessarily true. So as much as we all want to, vilify the other woman and say how horrible she is to be involved with a married man, and particularly a married man who might have children, we don't really know what's going on there and what he's told her. If this woman is taking care of your kids, and if your joint custody is 50-50, and half the time this person is the one who's disciplining your kids and serving them dinner, it's better not to make an outright war with her, because it puts the children in the middle. So I know maybe this is an old-fashioned idea, but if you want to try to be ladylike, or you want to try to have dignity and be neutral as much as you can in your interactions with her, if you have children who are going back and forth and who are going to be living in that household with their father and the girlfriend or his new wife, it's best if you can at least outwardly make with the teeth and just try to be civil, because the only thing that matters is the kids. And we don't want the kids to feel this terrible loyalty bind. Maybe they go over there and maybe she's nice to them, and maybe they have a good time when they all go together to the movie or something. And then are they going to feel guilty? I shouldn't be having fun because mommy doesn't like her. You have to be Mother Teresa. You really have to be a saint in order to be able to manage that. And any woman who's doing that, I give you 100% of my appreciation, and I'm in awe of women who have to do that, and send the children over to the runaway husband and his new wife or girlfriend. I really am in awe of that. It's very, very tricky. But I think that if we can take the high road, it's the best thing possible, and certainly not to badmouth the other woman to the children, because they may be making a relationship with her.
So what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is feeling like they are stuck in this process? How do we get unstuck?
Well, I'm going to say the thing that I've said before, which is jump out of an airplane. Do something wonderful. Do something exciting. Take that trip. I had one woman who bought an RV and drove across country. Do something. I mean, it doesn't have to be an expensive thing like that. But just do something different in your life. If you're feeling stuck and you're feeling stuck in mourning, you want to know that you're alive and that you have a life to live and that you have a future in front of you. And sometimes the way to unstick it is the way a dog does when they're wet and they shake.
Right.
You got to shake it off, and you have to try to dare, do something that's daring.
Right.
And it might be join a meetup group if you don't feel like, and walk into a room full of strangers and go to a wine tasting or something like that. It might be something like that. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world, but that's what I would recommend. Let yourself know that you're alive.
Again, it goes back to looking at what are the things that maybe you always have wanted to do, and for whatever reason, you've not done that thing. One of the things that I've mentioned in the podcast, again, it doesn't have to be anything big, but if you can think of that one little thing, and the little successes start building up to the bigger successes. And so like for me, eventually I do want to travel, someplace by myself. And so right now it's figuring out what are some small trips that I can take so I feel comfortable going by myself. And eventually I hope to do something, go to Europe completely by myself. But I can't take that big step until I'm willing to take the small steps.
Yes. Yeah.
And feel great about it. Vikki, it's always a pleasure. And
it's a delight to talk to you, Christal. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. And so if women have questions for you,
yes,
can you just tell me what your email address is so that they can reach out to you if they have a question or want to connect in some way?
Sure. It's Vikki, Vikki, at runawayhusbands.com.
Okay. And so if they want to get in touch, they can get in touch.
That's it.
Best of luck, and you're doing fabulous work. And I'm going to tell you that you were my godsend in the early days when I was going through this. And on behalf of myself and all the women that you've been able to help over the years, I really do thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Christal.
So again, I want to thank Vikki for joining us in today's podcast. I know that her schedule can be a very busy one. She does continue practice as a marriage and family therapist, as well as her work for women like the both of us who have gone through being abandoned by our now ex-husbands. So, I am trying to bring something a little different to the podcast world. I know that there are podcasts out there that deal with relationships, they deal with divorces, but I really do think that for women like Vikki and I, this divorce is a lot different and can be pretty traumatic for the women who are experiencing it. So I hope that I am bringing some value to those who are choosing to listen to this podcast. Even if you're not going through the types of divorces that we have gone through and you find this valuable, I would really love if you could leave me some feedback on any of the various platforms out there that you use in order to listen to Overcomer, Living a Full Life After. And so just to remind you, you can find me on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, and the platform where I'm hosted on Podbean. So, leave me a comment, leave me feedback. I would love to hear from you if you're listening to this podcast. So where can you find me? There are a few places that you can find me, and that is you can find me on Facebook through my Facebook group, Overcomer with Christal. You can also find me on Instagram at I am Christal Hall. My first name is spelled Christal. And then I also have a blog called it's never too late to try.com. If you have questions that you have of Vikki, you can reach out to her through email at Vikki, Vikki, at runawayhusbands.com. And I also hope that you will check her website out as well, where you're going to be able to get some additional resources. Vikki also has a Facebook group for women who are going through this called Runaway Husbands. So, if you are a woman who have found themselves being abandoned by your husband and you do not know which direction to turn, I would really encourage you to buy the book, Runaway Husbands, The Abandoned Wife's Guide to Recovery and Renewal, and also checking out Vikki's website, runawayhusbands.com. I want you to remember that you can overcome and you can live a full life after. Thank you so much.